Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Now, President of the African Development Bank, AfDB, Akinwunmi Adesina, is in the news. A brewing crisis of succession at the Apex lending institution has put the highly reputed Nigerian former agriculture minister in murky waters, or to put it clearly, intense scrutiny. But support for him is increasing. The latest from his country, Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, has opposed calls by the U.S. Treasury for an independent probe into whistleblower allegations that Adesina awarded contracts to friends and relatives after an earlier internal investigation cleared him. On Tuesday, President Muhammadu Buhari met with Adesina at the presidential villa in Abuja. After that meeting, the country says it stands solidly behind the re-election of Adesina, but it is not alone in our support for Adesina. Equatorial Guinea, Sierra Leone, too, are backing the Adesina, who's also won praise from the African Union, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and gathered support on social media via the hashtag #IStandWithAdesina. But the dispute has drawn in other AfDB members, with the UK, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Belgium, and Austria among those who've joined. Denmark, Finland, Norway, Sweden, and the US call for an external investigation. There are many concerns, though. This, to many, is a bigger fight. For some, this is all about US pressure. But what do we make of this? With us this morning is Piet Rampedi, editor of the African Times in Johannesburg, South Africa. Piet, a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. Do you think that the allegation against Mr. Adesina now is a premeditated attempt to against his leadership, the leadership of the African Development Bank, AfDB?
The allegation against Mr. Adesina appears to be a ploy to block his re-election as the head of the African Development Bank. First of all, the allegations are vague and they've been made by anonymous complainants, the so-called whistleblowers. The allegations are also have also been made just a few months before Mr. Adesina was due for re-election, unopposed as the head of the bank. Secondly, the whistleblowers' allegations are so vague. They mentioned stuff such as the conflict of interest in relation to current and ex-employees, unethical conduct, and preferential treatment. Thirdly, the allegations were investigated by the bank's ethics committee, which found them to be baseless. But the US, one of the non-African shareholders, refused to accept the findings and claimed that exonerating Mr. Adesina without a proper investigation would damage the bank's reputation. And the question there is simple. Why would exonerating someone through an investigation be a problem if the investigation has been impartial? All these factors suggest that Mr. Adesina has been presumed to be guilty until proven innocent by America, which is a problem. It points to interference by the Americans in the running of an African institution.
So you say this points to U.S. involvement, but what do you think about the leadership of Adesina himself and his planned comeback to head the bank? Indeed, what do you make of this?
I think Mr. Adesina has generally done very well as the head of the African Development Bank, according to media reports, which I've been following since these allegations were leveled against him. Under his leadership, the African Development Bank received AAA ratings from almost all the global ratings agencies, which is in itself an indication of sound fiscal and risk management, and also strong support from all the 81 members of the African Development Bank. Secondly, his re-election has been supported already by about 16 African presidents, as well as almost all the foreign ministers of the AU. And that in itself is a show of confidence. It shows that there's support for him. His leadership is acknowledged. His leadership is respected by his peers on the continent, and he's also seen as a reformer who championed transformational development for the continent over a 10-year period in areas such as electricity, industrialization, integration, which are currently some of the major challenges facing the African continent. And if you look at somebody who led the African Development Bank, in an era like this one, and he came out intact as a leader. You can see that he really did very well. And the fact that there's not been a single person who has been touted as a challenger is in itself a sign that his success is well acknowledged amongst his peers, and that he enjoys the respect of his peers on the African continent.
Indeed, Piet, we wait to see just how things turn out, whether the U.S. would listen to the objections or would proceed with the external investigations. I'd like to thank you very much for speaking with us and sharing your insights on the issue with us this morning. Thank you. Thank you very much. Editor of the African Times in Johannesburg, South Africa, Piet Rampedi there. This is the Morning Call right here on African News. We have more stories across the continent right next.